Northern parts and Scotland a low of 3. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Serena Farrow.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Iain Dale.
Hello, a very good evening. It's 9:03 on LBC. If you'd like to watch us over the next hour, you can do so on our Facebook page, on our Twitter feed, or on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk. It's our Tuesday interview. We like to have one person in the studio with me for the hour. I'll speak to them for the first half an hour, then we'll bring in your questions at 8:30. So do give us a call, 0345 6060 973. With me tonight is Dominic Grieve, the Conservative MP for Beaconsfield, former Attorney General. Now, Dominic, very good evening.
Good evening.
I suppose our conversation is going to be dominated by Brexit and your role in Parliament for obvious reasons. But let's get your reaction first to what's happened today in the European Parliament, where the 29 Brexit MEPs turned their back on the Parliament when they played Ode to Joy, the anthem, and Liberal Democrat MPs all sported yellow T-shirts, which I can't say it because it's not 9 o'clock, but it rhymes with Grolix to Brexit on it. What's your reaction to that, both of those things?
Childish. Just childish, both of them. Both groups. I mean, why do it? It's completely pointless. In any case, the playing of an anthem is not a national anthem. It just happens to be the anthem that the EU has chosen. So if you don't want to be there, stay away. If you do want to be there, then I think you should act with a certain amount of courtesy to the other participants, who are the other people who are in the hall. And both things, wearing T-shirts or, for that matter, turning your back on people, is just rude.
It also goes against the whole idea of global Britain. I mean, part of the whole reason for Brexit, whether one agrees with it or not, is to look outwards into the world. And that sort of thing just, to my mind, brings embarrassment on our country. It brings a little bit of shame on our country. It makes us look rather small in the world. I
agree with you. And whilst I have absolutely no doubt that there are some people who are in favour of Brexit because they believe in a global Britain vision, I have to say to you, however, that there are some people who believe in Brexit for reasons which are very different.
Well, let's come on to that subject, shall we? When this idea that you had, is it with Margaret Beckett, to stop government funding different departments in the event of a no-deal Brexit, just explain that one to me.
It's in one way very simple. Parliament's powers are in fact very limited. Prior to the Fixed Term Parliament Act, even bringing down a government on a motion of no confidence is only a matter of convention. Technically speaking, a government could ignore a vote of no confidence by the House of Commons. The only power we have is to grant or withhold supply, that is, money. And since the 13th century, the Commons has used refusals to grant supply or conditions attached to supply as a means of registering their concern with the government, that they are not happy with what a government might be doing. Now, in this particular case, Margaret Beckett attached an amendment to the estimates which said that the estimates would, of course, be paid, but they would cease to be paid if a Prime Minister sought to take us, or took us out, not sought to take us, took us out of the EU with no deal without the prior approval of the House of Commons. So an entirely constitutional and legitimate thing to do against an act which, in my view, is actually unconstitutional. So that's why she did it, and there's never been any risk, and hardly Margaret Beckett as a Labour MP of considerable distinction, no risk that in fact people would be left without funds, but a way of putting a shot across any incoming Prime Minister's bows that the Commons must be respected in the views they put across.
When you say that there would be no prospect of people being left without funds, that's simply not true, is it? Because, of course, some of the departments that were involved here, I believe one was the Department of Education, so schools presumably wouldn't have funds. Another was the DWP, which administers all the benefits.
I don't think that would have happened for two reasons. Firstly, the money will be paid unless the Prime Minister did an act which is unconstitutional, in my view. Secondly, so that's the first thing. And secondly, any Prime Minister who showed signs that he intended to be so reckless as to ignore the stated will of the Commons as set out in a supply motion would be brought down. and would never actually get to the point of carrying out a no-deal Brexit against the express wishes of, and without the approval of the House of Commons.
So how is taking us out of the EU under no deal, which is the default legal position at the moment, and you're a former Attorney General, you know more about these things than I do, but that's how I understand it. How would that be unconstitutional when it is the legal position?
It's unconstitutional because, by convention in this country, if the House of Commons expresses a clear opinion by majority that it wants something to happen, governments should respect it. And until very recently, it would have been regarded as quite extraordinary that shouldn't happen. But we've got ourselves into a really very strange place in the last 3 or 4 years, which is that governments routinely disregard resolutions of the House of Commons. In the old days, they were considered to be virtually sacrosanct, and the government would at least have to negotiate with the Commons or defer to the Commons if it expressed such an opinion.
But the Commons hasn't expressed
Well,
that.
it has.
Well, but the law has to be changed, doesn't it?
No, the fact that the Act, firstly, actually, as it stands at the moment, the Act simply says that we're going to leave on a day appointed by a minister. Although the default position is the 31st of October, because that is when our period in the EU comes to an end under the treaties by agreement with our EU partners.
So how's that unconstitutional?
If the Commons says no, we don't wish that to happen.
But it hasn't.
Well, it has, yes. It made its position clear about a no-deal Brexit way back in April, and passed by a majority a clear indication that it didn't believe a no-deal Brexit was in the national interest.
But that wasn't a motion that the government needed to take. No, I mean, it was just.
It is. This comes
just
back to our earlier point, which is that it is in fact a motion the government ought to take.
It wasn't a so-called meaningful vote, was it?
Well, it was a vote, and it doesn't matter. A resolution of the House of Commons should be respected, and this is quite unusual that we should be in a situation where that doesn't happen.
You might say that it should be respected, but legally, that's got nothing to do with the Constitution.
All I can say is legally. Legally, a government doesn't, or certainly didn't prior to the Fixed Term Parliament Act, have to resign if a motion of no confidence was passed in it. But now it does.
But the legal position is that we leave on the 31st of October, and the only way that can be changed is if the law is changed.
No. It's not true that it can only be changed if the law is changed. To change that, all that is actually technically necessary is for the government to turn up in Brussels and hand in, request an extension and get it, or hand in a letter of revocation. Now, that's not going to happen. Well, if the House of Commons says normally that it expects a government to do something, the government ought to listen. The alternative is that the government may fall and will have to be replaced with another government.
Well, that's going a little bit further down the road, but it strikes me as rather odd for a lawyer, which you are, to say that, a law doesn't have to be changed by the government introducing a new law to replace it.
But I'm not seeking to change the law. I've tried to make this point before.
But the law is that we leave on the 31st.
No, the law is not.
It is.
No, it's not. It's not that we leave on the 31st.
Well, what is it then?
The law simply says that we are leaving the EU on a date agreed between ourselves and the European Union.
And that date has been agreed as the 31st of October.
With the European Union.
Yeah.
That date is extendable, and that date is technically, we now know, revocable. So for both those reasons, far from being fixed in stone, it's capable of being adjusted.
But we have two potential prime ministers, one of whom is absolutely adamant that we're going to leave on the 31st of October, and the other one seems to be becoming more adamant by the day that we're leaving on the 31st of October. So one of them is going to get elected. One of them says, well, I'm better placed to negotiate with the EU than my opponent, i.e. Jeremy Hunt says that. And Boris Johnson says, well, I'm going to go in there with a different style of negotiation and we're going to do this, that and the other. But they both agree that we are leaving on the 31st of October. And Jeremy Hunt has said in terms over the last 48 hours that if there is no sign of the EU willing to renegotiate an agreement by the 30th of September, no deal it's going to be.
I understand their stated positions, but I come back to my point that to seek to carry that out, if there is a majority opinion in the House of Commons which says that that should not happen, is a very high-risk strategy.
High risk because it actually means that there will be a vote of confidence. I mean, that's the natural conclusion.
I think it's inevitable
here,
that
it?
one would end up there, even though it's not where I would like to end up. So the whole purpose of Margaret Beckett's amendment, which I seconded, I put my name to it, is to try to find ways of putting out a clear message to the government without getting to such an apocalyptic end. And indeed, if you look at what I've been trying to do over the last 18 months, it's been trying to find a structured way within the conventions of the House and, if necessary, statute, which is why I did it in the EU Withdrawal Act, so that the House of Commons could express its view on the situation that was arising at the end of the negotiations. And indeed, we did succeed in doing that up until April, but since April, we don't have a clear mechanism for doing it. Your
problem is that there were, on virtually every occasion, when there was a new motion put by various MPs in the House of Commons, they were all defeated, that nobody could come up with an alternative vision for how plenty of people actually came up with alternative visions, but nobody voted for them as a majority.
Well, you're absolutely right that one of the reasons why we've got this problem is that, firstly, the present Prime Minister's negotiated a deal which would take us out of the EU in an orderly way, which was rejected initially on a majority of 220 in the House of Commons. She negotiated that in good faith. But I think that when it was looked at by members of the House from different angles, it was felt that it took us towards a second-class relationship. Since then, we've effectively polarised. There are some of us who are saying there is no good deal for leaving the EU, and the reality is that we ought to go back to the public and get the public's opinion in a people's vote or another referendum, call it whatever you like. There are some of my colleagues who are insistent that the default position is that we have to leave, and if we don't have a deal, that we have to leave anyway. And I don't agree with that. And I think you'll find there's a majority of the House of Commons that doesn't.
Well, I'm not so sure about that now. I think that might have been the case a few months ago, but I detect, and feel free to disagree, but I detect opinion not just in Parliament, but also in the general public hardening on this. And if you look at some of the polls, there was one that YouGov did the other day, which had 48% of people supporting no deal and 40% supporting another referendum. Now, that must worry you.
I'm not sure I agree with that, and I've seen the different opinion polls. I mean, overall, there's been an incremental shift month by month towards more people wanting to remain in the EU by one means or another, and I've not seen any opinion poll showing things moving backwards on that. I agree with you, however, that opinion is polarising. Yes, I mean, we know, for example, that leaving with the Prime Minister's deal appears to be immensely unpopular, and I certainly accept.
Well, that deal is dead now, isn't it?
Well, I think it is. I mean, and
you agree with Boris Johnson?
Well, let's put it this way: I find it difficult to see how it will ever get a majority in the House of Commons. But of course, both Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt are both talking about renegotiating it to turn it into something more palatable. I don't object to their doing that, although I do have some doubts as to whether they're going to be able to get what they want. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a perfectly respectable thing for either of them to attempt.
Will you give them fair wind on that and actually give them the time to do what they intend to do? And I agree with you. I can't quite see who they're going to be negotiating with over the next few months, but maybe they know something we don't.
I have no difficulty giving them a fair wind for doing that, although logically, if these negotiations are going to make any progress at all, I find it very difficult to see that we would then be out by the 31st of October. I think you'd have to extend for longer in order to complete the negotiations. But I do worry about the threats, particularly made by Boris Johnson, which are to the effect that he would take us out with no deal. He would seek to ignore the express will of the House of Commons in order to do that if necessary. And indeed, in some circumstances, I don't think he's entirely abandoned the idea of proroguing Parliament. He certainly hasn't excluded it, and that would be massively unconstitutional thing to do.
I have questioned him on this on several times in these hustings, and Liz Truss, one of his chief supporters, has gone that far, but he doesn't ever say that. Just before we go to a break, I'm pretty sure I remember you at some stage saying that you could not keep the Conservative whip if Boris Johnson became Prime Minister. You said you'd give him a fair wind earlier. Does that mean that you will not be resigning the Conservative whip on July the 23rd if he wins?
I think it depends on what he has to say about no-deal Brexit and his intentions.
Well, we know what his intentions are.
we will have to wait and see how he approaches it on that date. But I certainly am prepared to give him the benefit of the doubt in terms of an attempt at renegotiating our exit terms. As I said to the present Prime Minister, if there comes a point where the Conservative Party is in agreement about exit terms, even if I don't like them, but they are the terms for a reasonable, coherent exit, then I would have to give very serious consideration to supporting it, even though I happen to think that leaving the EU is a great historic mistake.
Well, let's just clarify this, because he has said that leaving without a deal is his second choice, but he thinks if we've got to the end of October and there is no prospect of a deal.
I certainly won't be in the Conservative Party when we are approaching a no-deal Brexit. That I'm quite sure about.
So if Jeremy Hunt becomes Prime Minister and on the 30th of September he announces to the House of Commons, he says, well, I've done my best, but actually there is no prospect of a deal now, so therefore we have to now prepare to leave on the 31st of October with no deal, that would be crunch time for you with him?
Yes, I think it would.
Okay.
Yes.
Very clear. We'll come to your calls in a moment as well. 0345 6060 973. It's 19 minutes past 8.
The Battle for PM. Follow it live on LBC.
You can complain free to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman about missold PPI. Alternatively, if you haven't got the time or the inclination, then just get the claims guys to manage the claims process for you. With the August 29th deadline approaching, time's at a premium anyway. So if you can't find your paperwork or you're not even sure you have PPI, it's definitely time to make a decision and start your PPI claim before it's too late. Text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The Claims Guys.
Becky, you've been out there for a while. Come and top up your sun cream.
But I'm powering up.
What do you mean?
You can get electricity from the sun, right? So I thought I'd try it too.
I don't think it quite works like that, love. But either way, you need more cream on.
Fine.
At Shell Energy, we supply all our home energy customers with 100% renewable electricity as standard. Just their homes, mind you. Search Shell Energy. Home energy matters. Visit shellenergy.co.uk.
Don't miss out on Vodafone's double data deal. That's double data on all pay monthly smartphones. Yes, all pay monthly smartphones. Now a huge 30 gig for the price of 15, starting at only £30 a month. Double the selfie sharing, double the playlist pumping, and double the maps mapping. To get double data, go online or in-store today. Hurry, offer ends 9th of July. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone. Terms and details at vodafone.co.uk/summer.
And now, before the next programme, a short poem written and read for you today by the celebrated poet Trevor Jones, simply called Life. Who knows what it really means?
Means. Beans. Oh, delicious Heinz beans on piping hot buttered toast. Now that's poetry.
Dreaming of the unique taste of Heinz beans with no added sugar makes it better.
At first we were worried about using purple bricks, but since we sold with them I haven't been able to stop going on about them, have I, dear?
No, love.
I've been telling everyone, family, friends, that confused guy at the supermarket.
Yeah, you haven't really shut up about that.
But seriously, did I tell you about our purple bricks estate agent Michael?
I met him too, he was nice.
We could talk to him whenever. Anything we asked, he could do it.
That's enough now,
He
dear.
was brilliant, always available to chat on the phone.
Enough,
I
Robert.
could email him any time of the day or night.
Purple bricks. There's no need for commissary.
Fixed fee payable on instruction or after 10 months. Viewing services cost extra. See website for more details.
Psst. Did you know that Pimlico Plumbers have an utterly fabulous 24-hour service for plumbing, heating, drains, roofing, electrics, appliances, carpentry and building? Whatever your predicament, Pimlico Plumbers can send a friendly face to your door within the hour. Shh! And just between us, their work even comes with a 12-month guarantee. They aren't just any old tradesmen, they're Pimlico Plumbers, and they're always available on 0207 928 8888 or at pimlicoplumbers.com.
This is LBC with Iain Dale. Call 0345 6060 973.
22 minutes past 8. We have Dominic Grieve with us, but he's going to be taking your calls after 8:30. Dominic, can we put our cards on the table? Is your objective to, as the Liberal Democrats would put it, stop Brexit?
No, it isn't.
Because Andrew Donis was very honest when he was sitting there saying, yes, it absolutely is.
Well, cards can be put on the table very clearly. I think Brexit is a thoroughly bad idea. I've tried, actually, over the last 3 years, to reconcile myself to it. And I've tried to see the silver lining in the cloud. I've actually, particularly in the early stages of Theresa May's premiership, I listened very carefully to what she had to say, and I tried to work out in my own mind whether, even though there might be some economic disadvantages, the country would emerge from this more unified, would be better off. Perhaps we would obsess less about Europe and we would find some middle ground. But I have to say that as time has gone on, and particularly when it became apparent that the deal that she was negotiating was so different from the one that she'd been aspiring to, my conclusion is that this is just going to do us a lot of damage, and that the things which people wanted from it are just not going to materialise. I think they will find that they are not there. And the economic downsides, national security downsides, will be considerable. So, I guess I don't want Brexit, but in advocating a referendum, I have to accept that the possibility is clearly there, particularly if you're right about the opinion polls, that actually the public may turn around and say, we told you once, and here's what we want, and we want to leave. In fact, we want to leave with no deal, in which case I would accept it. And it would have this advantage that I think the Conservative Party would stay together. I certainly wouldn't leave in those circumstances. I would accept the verdict.
Did you nearly say flounce out?
Well, I think people do flounce out. I've noticed quite a lot of my colleagues who do a lot of flouncing, actually. But I'm certainly not going to do that. No. But what I will not do is rubber stamp taking people out on a no-deal Brexit, which I think is uniquely damaging, without people being asked if that's what they want. And they've had nearly 3 years in which to make their own assessment. So that's where I am. And I entirely accept that if we had a referendum, we'd have to organise it in a way that is clear, transparent and fair, try to get it over and done with as quickly as possible and move on.
Because it's quite difficult to think now what the question would be. There was a logical argument in April for it to be the Prime Minister's deal or Remain. That's what a lot of the People's Vote campaign were wanting. I argued that would be seen as a rigged referendum because they completely knew that people wouldn't vote for the Prime Minister's deal. And then there was this idea of a three-way referendum. Now, if the Prime Minister's deal is gone, what would you now have on the ballot paper?
Firstly, I agree with you. I've long argued that much as I don't like no deal and I think it's the worst possible outcome, I think it would be very difficult and would raise understandable criticism if it were not on the ballot paper. You could put all three on the ballot paper. The fact the Prime Minister's deal is currently not popular doesn't mean it shouldn't be there, but I suspect it will go out first, and it has to be done on an alternative vote system. I entirely accept you can't have a first-past-the-post system with three such questions. So you could have Remain, you could have the Prime Minister's deal, or a variant of it as negotiated by the new Prime Minister, and you could also have no deal, although I have to emphasise that I think it is for those who are advocates of no deal to be absolutely crystal clear about what it is and its immediate deliverability. Of course, it is deliverable to leave the EU with absolutely no agreements whatsoever on a given date. You can do that. But sometimes when I listen to them, I'm not sure that that's really what they're saying. And if they're saying something different, then I think they've got to be specific about it and about its immediate achievability. Because one thing I'm sure about is we would have to put in place the mechanism to make sure that we would leave immediately afterwards. We can't have further flapping around by Parliament having to pass further legislation. We would have to make sure that this choice is clear and can be implemented.
And of course that would take months, wouldn't it? So that would mean, just to have a referendum, it would mean invoking Article 50 again on the 31st of October. Is there any part of you that, and Boris Johnson and Jeremy Hunt have both made it clear they have no intention of doing that, but let's say that they did, there's no guarantee now that the EU would play ball with that, is there?
I think there's very little doubt in my mind that if we wanted a referendum, the EU would extend for the referendum. Right. They would extend also if we're in the middle of a general election. But I rather agree with you that I think they would extend for a concrete purpose which brings a resolution, not just a general extension of the kind that they gave us in April.
So let's imagine we're nearing the end of October. It looks as if we are going to leave the EU without a deal. is that the point where you say to Jeremy Corbyn, if you put down a confidence vote, I and X number of colleagues will support you in it?
As I said, it's the thing I wish to do as a last resort.
But you are prepared to do it?
But there would, yes, I'm absolutely
you
clear
think
about this. I cannot continue supporting a political party or supporting a Prime Minister in office who wishes to undertake what I think is such a totally crazy thing.
So a no-deal Brexit you consider to be far more damaging to this country than a Corbyn government?
I'm not sure I agree with the basic premise.
Well, it would be either or, wouldn't it?
Well, I don't agree with that for a number of reasons. Let's just work it through. Firstly, if the government were to fall on a no-confidence motion, it doesn't necessarily mean there has to be a general election. There is a period of 14 days in which an attempt can be made to form a new administration. That's the first thing.
But that would have to be a Corbyn-led administration,
No, it wouldn't. It could be an administration led by anybody who can command a majority of the House of Commons. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you had a general election, it doesn't necessarily follow from that the electorate will elect Jeremy Corbyn or the Labour Party. I think if the electorate have rumbled Jeremy Corbyn and his uselessness, which I think is pretty manifest, and also the fact that he has very wacky policies. So neither of those are a given.
But are they going to elect a Boris Johnson-led Conservative Party when he hasn't delivered on his promise to get us out by the 31st of October? That would be manna from heaven for Nigel Farage, wouldn't it?
It might well be manna from heaven for Nigel Farage, but I have to say I'm not going to support a Boris Johnson Conservative Party that is trying to take us out of the EU with no deal.
So who would you support then? Because if you can't, you wouldn't be allowed to stand for a start because you'd have had the whip withdrawn.
The question as to whether I stood in what capacity or what party I might decide to support is a completely separate issue. But I'd have to make up my mind at that time.
It could only be the Liberal Democrats, could it not?
Well, I don't think I would necessarily be voting for the Liberal Democrats.
Well, if you're not going to vote Conservative under Boris Johnson, you're not going to vote for Nigel Farage, you're not going to vote for Jeremy Corbyn, there is only one alternative, is there not?
Well, Iain, I might not vote at all. I mean, all those things are possible. I'm not under an obligation to vote. So, but the point at issue is for me a fundamental one, and I think it is actually shared by a significant number of colleagues, which is that a government which tries to take us out with no deal, without the consent of the House of Commons, cannot have our confidence.
You can't give an exact number, I know, but when you say a significant number, Tobias Ellwood put it at 12. I think it's higher than that.
I think it could well be higher than that, yes.
The Chancellor clearly has signalled that he would be one of them. Over 20?
Very difficult to speculate. I appreciate this is a pretty...
Because that's 20 people, and we ought to explain how this works to our listeners, that if you do that, if you vote against your own party in a vote of confidence, that is the end of your Conservative Party
do bear
career.
in mind, I've been a Conservative Party member, I think, for 47 years, and I've been a Conservative Member of Parliament and proud to be a Conservative Member of Parliament for 22. So this is pretty emotional stuff. But I have to say that the bottom line is that I will not and cannot support a government or a Prime Minister who'd seek to do that. I try to do everything to avoid it getting to that point. And if it did get to that point, as I think I've just explained, I would also try to see if there's any mechanism to ensure that the Prime Minister who I've just got rid of could be replaced by somebody who could bring us all back together again. But
Who would that be, though?
Well, I'm not sure, but strange things happen.
Ed Davey was suggesting Yvette Cooper or Hilary Benn.
Well, all those are just speculation. But
you must have someone in mind.
No, not necessarily, because I can't look ahead. I mean, it is possible that you could end up with a government of national unity for the specific purpose of delivering a Brexit referendum, for example. Yes, but equally I have to accept that might not happen.
Well, it looks like it's going to be an exciting autumn one way or another. We're going to take calls in just after the news, 0345 6060 973, if you'd like to put your question to Dominic Grieve. It's 8:32. Serena Farrow has the news headlines.
The leaders of the 28 EU countries have nominated who they want to be in the organisation's top jobs. European Council President Donald Tusk would be replaced with Belgium's Prime Minister Charles Michel. German Defence Minister Ursula von der Leyen is up to succeed European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker. The Governor of the Bank of England claims there's evidence no-deal Brexit fears and ongoing uncertainty is damaging the economy. Mark Carney's told MPs on the Treasury Select Committee it's slowing growth and weighing down business investment. And a 78-year-old's been jailed for shooting dead his great-grandson with an air rifle. Albert Grannan's been sentenced to 3 years after admitting the manslaughter of 6-year-old Stanley Metcalfe in East Yorkshire last year. LBC weather staying largely dry tonight and clear as well in the rest of the morning, particularly for all of the UK, although we'll have showers moving into northern England and Scotland, a low of 3 degrees.
This is LBC.
LBC has been working with the Get Into Teaching campaign to look at how a career in teaching can shape lives beyond the classroom.
It's a very positive job in terms of being able to see the children make so much progress in front of you every single day. Teaching allows me to work with future leaders, and we really try to smash the glass ceilings in terms of the children's potential.
Go to lbc.co.uk for more information on a career in teaching, to hear the full discussion, and for a chance to win an iPad Air and Apple Watch. With LBC.
Radio, playlists and podcasts.
We're it all together and all for free.
Global Player. Download it from your App Store now.
Esso customers using their Nectar card could win up to 100,000 points with every fill. So to miss Optimistic in the convertible at pump 4, your luck's in. Because the only thing that's going to be raining on you today are Nectar points. And a gentleman in the van at pump 8, you could spend your winning points on a new pressure washer and blast off all those hilarious pictures your mates had drawn on the back of your van.
Esso Nectar, helping fuel your everyday. T's and C's apply at participating Esso sites until 24th of July. Visit esso.co.uk.
At Lidl, we're big on the tennis. Big on 400 grams of British strawberries at £1.69. And at 95p, big on never having too much cream. Big on popping the Prosecco for just £5.99. That's game, set and match. Now that's big on quality and always Lidl on price. Subject to availability, selected stores, excludes NI.
You can complain free to your lender or the Financial Ombudsman about missold PPI. Alternatively, if you haven't got the time or the inclination, then just get the claims guys to manage the claims process for you. With the August 29th deadline approaching, time's at a premium anyway. So if you can't find your paperwork or you're not even sure you have PPI, it's definitely time to make a decision and start your PPI claim before it's too late. Text ANSWER to 66777. Text ANSWER to 66777 now.
The Claims Guys.
This summer, Q is for quizzical comedy.
That's what you're getting, so you better enjoy it.
Quality craftsmanship.
It's bang on.
Quirky cars. Quite brilliant goals.
Superb goal!
Quarried treasures.
Big nuggets, here we come.
Quantifiably, quintessentially, quite simply, Quest. Now in our new home on Freeview Channel 12 and also available on Virgin, Freesat and Sky.
It's absolute magic.
Ian Dale on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
2529 here on LBC. Dominic Grieve is with us. He's about to take your calls. If you'd like to watch us, you can do so on the LBC website at lbc.co.uk, on our Facebook page or Twitter feed at LBC. Terry is in Whitley Bay. Hi, Terry.
Good evening, Ian.
Hi.
I'd like to ask Dominic, given the fact that the Lancaster House speech, the Prime Minister at the time, before the 2017 election, outlined the red lines for a deal, and the fallback position was no deal is better than a bad deal. Why did Dominic stand on that manifesto, and why is he reneging on it now?
If you look at the manifesto made absolutely clear what the Prime Minister was trying to achieve. And she made clear that she was trying to achieve a departure from the EU, a deep and special relationship, and crucially, she stated in the manifesto, it was Conservative Party policy, that we had to know all the details of the future relationship at the date of departure. Now, she said all those things in good faith, but those proved in practice to be undeliverable. And indeed, what she delivered was significantly different from the Lancaster House speech. If she had succeeded in getting what she wanted in the Lancaster House speech, I have absolutely no doubt that she would have been seen as one of the most successful prime ministers in the last 100 years. But she wasn't able to do that. As for the suggestion that we would then leave with no deal. You're absolutely right that there was one reference in the manifesto, no deal is better than a bad deal, and I made absolutely clear at the time of the election that I thought that was just rhetoric, because in my view it was never going to be the case.
She did say it quite often, didn't she?
Well, she repeated it more afterwards rather than in the early stages. But it's
yes, but you have to bear in mind what the voters voted for.
Well, the difficulty is, what did the voters vote for?
We voted for a deal, and the fallback option was no deal.
Well, I appreciate that, but I, as a Member of Parliament, have to make a judgment. And if I think the national interest is going to be so damaged by a no-deal Brexit, it's my plain duty to try to prevent it. And that is my own assessment.
That is not following through on the manifesto.
Well, it doesn't actually matter if it isn't. It does matter to me in one sense, but if in the passage of time, no,
you were not prepared to honour.
No, that's not true at all. I've made absolutely clear how I viewed the manifesto at the time of the election, and I made that clear. And had she been able to deliver on the manifesto content, that would have been a different matter. But what happened is that she wasn't able to do that, and my own judgment is that what is currently being suggested, which is a no-deal Brexit, is uniquely damaging. And in those circumstances, I can't support it. If that's the end of my political career, well, that's the end of my political career. But I will not do something.
It's not just the end of a political career. It's a matter of trust with the electorate.
Well, I understand your point, and I certainly agree that there are trust issues over the whole of Brexit. But that doesn't detract for me from the key issue that I will not do something which I believe will do my country great harm. It's fundamental.
Final word from you, Terry?
I think if politicians are going to stand on a manifesto, you have to stand on all of it. It's the same with Dominic, it's the same with Anna Soubry. They're all inventing their own manifestos that they apparently stood on. The electorate vote on what the Prime Minister says. Either you get on board with that, or you get off board. Simple as that.
OK. Let's move on to Thomas in Worthing. Thomas, what's your question, please?
Good evening. Can I just quickly add, the Conservative Party manifesto said we would be living in a single market, and that seems to be one of the main points of this issue. Now, we were offered Canada plus terms by Donald Tusk in October last year, and that seems to have been completely forgotten. I would have thought that would have been a very good platform to start a kind of alternate kind of negotiations to leave the European Union in the way that the Conservative Party manifesto outlined. But my main point actually is that, is Dominic Grieve prepared to jeopardise the future of the Conservative Party as a party, as an entity, if it means keeping us in the European Union?
I'm not sure I would quite express it in those terms. I'm a member of the Conservative Party and have been for 47 years because I think the Conservative Party is a force for good in my country. That's why I support it, because I've agreed with its philosophical principles. And whilst there may have been occasions when I've thought some of the policies being pursued might be mistaken, I've been prepared to accept that. But if the Conservative Party is going to pursue a policy outcome which I think is really damaging to my country on my own assessment, and that indeed shared by colleagues, then at that point my plain duty as a Member of Parliament is not to facilitate it. I can try and persuade my colleagues to change course. I can try to look at alternatives. I can try to suggest a referendum to resolve the matter, which is what I've been doing. But the bottom line is that I will not vote for something which I believe will be uniquely damaging to our country's future.
Surely, if you take that position, you can look back to Zach Goldsmith, his position on the third runway at Heathrow, and take a similar position, which is you are in conflict with the Conservative Party position. You should call a by-election and say, I don't stand for this, I don't accept this, I'm going to make a point, I will stand as an independent against the party line, and if that by-election is successful, then you can turn around and say, see, at least my constituency stands opposed to the current Conservative Party position. I don't think, it's about minimising disruption, surely, and, damaging, business prospects, that kind of thing. Take a stand if you must, and call a by-election.
I think you're making a perfectly fair point. But equally, we are in the middle of a national crisis. And I don't think, my own assessment is I should continue fighting my corner within the Conservative Party.
Have you thought about fighting a by-election on this? Because, of course, our mutual friend David Davis did something rather similar, didn't he, 10 years ago?
In rather different circumstances. He still stood as a Conservative.
Yeah.
But he did decide to do that. Yes, of course, it's something which is, quite apart from the number of people who said to me, either supportively or because they want to get rid of me, you should do that. And it's something that one can't exclude. But I have to say, for a variety of reasons, I would prefer to try to resolve this by the dialogue which takes place in Parliament. And I think that's what I should try to do. That's what Parliament is for. And it's not unusual or exceptional for MPs to sometimes vote against their own party line. And indeed, at the moment, we're watching party fragmentation take place. So I shall continue to argue my corner as I think best. But I do accept that the point that's being made is a perfectly reasonable one.
How did your constituency vote in the referendum?
It voted marginally and quite by 1% to stay in. It's a difficult assessment to make because I have one part of one district, the whole of one district, and part of another. The entire district I had voted by a tiny margin to leave, but the other one was very Remain. And I have to say, I think it might even be more than 1%, but we can't extrapolate exactly.
And obviously we've read about all of the troubles you've had with your constituency association who are trying to deselect you. What's that experience been like? Because presumably there are people that you've worked with in sort of well over the years, but on this issue they just think that you've gone tonto.
It's very painful. I've been an MP for 20 of the 22 years for a constituency in which I've had very good support from members of my association, delightful officers, people who've been kind to me personally, kind to my family, given me emotional support in the work that you do as an MP, quite apart from enjoying their hospitality. So nothing worse, really, than to end up with a situation where some of them disagree vehemently with you and some of them are angry about it. Others will be able to disagree politely. As for the opinion of my association, it's very hard to judge. I have 1,300 members of my association. It's the second largest in the country. And actually, the overall opinion of my association, I just don't know. Nobody knows. What I do know is that within the association, there are around 160, 170 people who are very angry and want actively to get rid of me. And there are some people who actively turn up to support me. So... and I have to manage those relationships as best I can, and I'm totally respectful of those who disagree with me and indeed of those who want to get rid of me. I think that we have to be courteous to each other, even at a time of high emotion, and some of the behaviour that's taken place was not, and frankly didn't do a huge amount of credit to the association, but I accept that emotions and tempers can flare, and this is a very emotional issue. It's perfectly obvious that Brexit is the most divisive issue this country has had for generations. It's probably the worst we've had since the 17th century.
That's quite a claim. Somebody has texted, Iain, my wife thinks the callers are doing a far better job than you. Well, wasn't it ever thus? That's why we have callers on LBC, and we'll have some more in a moment. It's 9:15.
James O'Brien, Monday to Friday from 10 a.m.
What are the Brexit Party protesting against when they turn their back on Beethoven? Well, they're protesting against the Parliament that they're in and drawing salaries from while not actually doing anything to represent the interests of their constituent. I don't get it.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
Get an Ocean credit card. Check if you're eligible in minutes, without affecting your credit score. It comes with a credit limit of up to £1,500 too. So get online and check for yourself at ocean.co.uk and get all that from Ocean. Intelligent Lending Limited is a credit broker. Capital One, the exclusive lender. Representative 39.9% APR variable.
OK, guys, as promised, here's my signature caprese salad with fresh Galbrani mozzarella. Ooh.
In Italy, we say Galbani.
Yeah, Galbrani, topped with fresh basil and drizzled with a perfect balsamic dressing. Mwah.
No, it's Galbani. Galbani mozzarella.
Well, that's what I said. Galbani.
Galbani.
Galbanani.
Oh, my Galbani. For proper Italian mozzarella, it's got to be Galbani.
Renewing your tax credits is too important to forget, so here's an unforgettable reminder.
Don't forget to renew your tax credits. It's very, very, very important.
Renew your tax credits by the 31st of July, or your payments will stop. Go to gov.uk/manage your tax credits today.
Esso are delighted to announce that customers can now collect Nectar points with every fill. So to the Sprog Fiver with his hands full of pump number 7, now you've got enough Nectar points to take those little treasures out for pizza. Or you could blow them on an inflatable sumo costume on eBay. If you can't beat them, join them.
Esso Nectar, helping fuel your everyday. Available at participating Esso sites. For more information, visit esso.co.uk.
Let's hear it for Ozzy, the nature-loving pug. He thought he'd get a buzz out of eating a bumblebee in the garden. Ouch! Oh. Luckily, his family didn't get stung, because Pets in a Pickle had little Ozzy covered. And now he's back in the garden, chasing butterflies. Phew! For pet insurance policies as unique as they are, get a free quote today at petsinapickle.co.uk.
Don't miss out on Vodafone's double data deal. That's double data on all pay monthly smartphones. Yes, all pay monthly smartphones. Now a huge 30 gig for the price of 15, starting at only £30 a month. Double the selfie sharing, double the playlist pumping, and double the maps mapping. To get double data, go online or in-store today. Hurry, offer ends 9th of July. The future's exciting. Ready? Vodafone. Terms and details at vodafone.co.uk/summer.
Iain Dale on LBC.
Dominic Grieve is here taking your calls. Milan is in Ashford. Hello, Milan. What would you like to say?
Good evening, gentlemen. Dominic, I'd like to ask about natural consequences of a no deal, because I don't think that's been discussed at all. How I understand it is that it's inferior arrangements in numerous areas, such as transfer of data, no passporting rights, no frictionless trade, no benefit from the EU's hundreds of trade and cooperation agreements with non-EU countries. Is that your understanding as well?
Yes, it is. It would be very disruptive. In the short term, probably chaotically disruptive. I'm not saying that in the medium term you can't sort out the chaos, but the chaos would be immediate and the damage to UK business, very great. I mean, I was talking earlier today to some businesses about this, and they made the point that they have invested huge sums of money, the larger companies, in warehousing, trying to ensure that they can keep supplies going so that they can maintain their businesses going. But they said most SMEs have been quite unable to do this and haven't taken these steps, and that many of them will in fact go bust.
What's I think really dangerous is that there's a lot of chest beating about a no deal and walking away, but there's been no plan on how to mitigate the impact of what I've just mentioned for businesses and citizens. And I honestly just feel there's not a real detailed understanding of what a no deal is. And I don't think journalists are asking Brexiteer MPs the detailed questions.
I certainly agree with that. And you see, I'm also involved in security issues. Now, some of our security is done bilaterally, but actually a lot of our national security is underpinned by the data sharing we do through the Schengen database, through our participation in the European policing, Europol, and the arrest warrant. And all these things will vanish overnight in 1 second and will no longer be operational. And it will cause...
But they don't need to, do they?
Well,
see a lot of these
but
things.
This comes back, Ian, to... but this is why I think we need to be so careful.
That in a no-deal situation, they've already done a deal, so we were told that aircraft wouldn't be flying, but that deal has already been done. There have been several others. Why would it be that individual EU countries or the EU itself will want to damage their own security by doing that?
But they might not wish to damage their own security. All those deals you've just talked about that have been identified are short-term. to be replaced potentially by others. But it's worth bearing in mind that thereafter we will simply be, if we do participate, observers in these structures, and we won't have any say in how they function. And I think actually with things like the Schengen database, there is a really serious problem, because either you accept the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice as to the regulation of data sharing, or you don't. And actually, even outside the EU, the European Court of Justice, I'm afraid, is going to continue to have a very profound influence on us if we wish to participate in those schemes. And none of this has really been properly talked about or discussed. You see, all this, I mean, I accept that the instincts which have driven people to vote leave are issues around sovereignty, identity, taking back control, are very powerful messages. But the truth, and I know this as a lawyer, is that the interdependency which exists and which actually between states, and which the United Kingdom has been involved in not just recently since joining the EU, but back over several hundred years, means that this recovery of sovereignty is completely mythical. Actually, we're signed up to about 14,000 treaties which prevent us in some way from having complete sovereign freedom of action, because we think it's to our advantage, of which the EU is only a tiny proportion. Lots of them have arbitral mechanisms for regulating disputes which we undertake to accept, which is just like the European Court of Justice. So in leaving the EU, we are going to leave the advantages of a measure of sovereignty pooling. We are going to continue, in fact, to be bound by many of the regulatory frameworks, because it is a big entity on our doorstep which will continue to dominate us, and the advantages are just not there. And leaving with no deal is going to make life very difficult for us.
But are you saying that departments like the Home Office, the Ministry of Defence, they haven't been working on this all along?
Yes, they have been working on them, but they have not got... They've got solutions if we leave with a deal Brexit, albeit they may be imperfect ones, but taking the literal meaning of no deal, even with those little tweaks of keeping things going for a few months, there will still be major problems.
I agree with you. I think there will be, if that happens, there will inevitably be problems in all sorts of areas in the short term. But you'd like to think that civil servants in these various departments have actually started, and they presumably should have started doing this at least 2 years ago, started planning for any eventuality.
I think they have been planning, but the fact you plan for every eventuality does not mean that you can meet every eventuality, or that you can replace what exists with something which is as good. And that is ultimately the cost-benefit analysis you have to make when making any decision.
But that's why I don't understand. It goes back to what we said at the beginning. Whereas if you think this is all so damaging, even potentially with a deal, why don't you just say, no, I think we should stay?
But I do think we should stay. I've never suggested anything else. But you've asked me...
You said to me at the beginning that you weren't really trying to stop Brexit.
No.
You were just trying to make it work better.
I made absolutely clear. So I shall make it clear again, Ian,
feel free.
I think remaining in the EU is much better, and I think leaving is bad for us. If there was an opportunity to campaign on a referendum, I will undoubtedly be advocating people remaining in the EU. But equally, if there's a referendum, as we discussed about what the questions would be, there's got to be complete finality. We've got to put in place the finality to enable, if people want to leave with no deal, that we can do that. And we need to do it very swiftly afterwards so that it can be immediately implemented. And I accept that that would then be the considered decision expressed by the electorate. So to that extent, in putting forward the referendum, I'm trying to put forward a mechanism for resolving this, even though I also have my own personal view about what I think the best course.
I want to get to another call, but someone's just texted. You haven't mentioned Article 24. Well, let's just briefly mention it now. Do you agree that Article 24 of GATT and the WTO, assuming that the EU agreed, would mean that we could invoke that on October the 31st and just leave things as they are while we negotiate another free trade deal? That is the situation, isn't it, if they agreed?
If they agreed, but in addition to that, there are issues over GATT that if you give certain privileges under GATT to your EU partners, you have to give them to everybody else. And that then raises questions about how you're going to operate your tariff regime and whether your businesses and farming and everything else will survive this. So it's actually much more complicated than that. Because under GATT, if you're saying all EU countries can trade on these terms, you've got to offer those terms to every other member in the world. So you are liable to be flooded out. And I think the EU would also have great difficulty with this because, of course, free trade wouldn't be able to be maintained because they'd want to prevent the influx via the United Kingdom of all these goods from outside which haven't paid their tariffs. It's actually much more complicated than that.
Let's go to Evan in Slough. Evan, what's your question?
Hi, Dominic. I believe the Brexit Party will continue to fight for the most extreme Brexit, even if we leave with a deal. And I also kind of fear that the breakup of the UK was also inevitable, given that they're not going to expose 27-member economies. What I want to know is, to me, the only thing that can really protect the Tories is more democracy, i.e. a vote on how we leave. To me, the only way that I think that the Tory party can be saved, because it's undemocratic to claim moderate support for most extreme Brexit. And would you agree that that's the case, that it really should be a vote on how we leave?
Well, I don't think I'd agree entirely, because I think that if we're going to have a referendum, it's not just about how we leave. I think the Remain option has also to be offered.
Well, you can reject. If people haven't delivered on their promises, then you can absolutely reject.
But then in that case, I think we're in agreement. I think a referendum is probably the best means of saving the Conservative Party and getting us out of this. I certainly agree with you that if we hold an election, the evidence is overwhelming that the Conservative Party is being sucked out at both ends. Lots of people are voting for the Brexit Party, and lots of people are also going off and voting for the Liberal Democrats. That was perfectly obvious in my constituency in the European elections.
Exactly. I mean, if you don't shut down the Brexit Party and show that the actual people stand up, and the real will of the people stands up and says, this is what we want, in other words, democracy, then you can't argue with that.
I agree with you, because
the Remain vote is by far the largest out there. We all know that, and that's why they don't want another vote.
Well, I agree with you about that as well. And the Brexit Party thrives on a narrative of betrayal. And clearly, in my view, that if you're going to have a referendum, then it's a bit difficult. You may complain about the referendum, but ultimately the referendum, it seems to me, it's a bit difficult to complain about the outcome. So for those reasons, I'm very much in favour of a referendum.
OK, Evan, thank you very much indeed. Last caller, I'm afraid. Sorry to everyone else who didn't get on. Dominic Grieve, thank you very much for spending the last hour with us on LBC. Now, coming up after 9, today in the European Parliament, Brexit MEPs turned their backs during the singing of Ode to Joy, the anthem of the European Union. Liberal Democrat MEPs wore bollocks to Brexit yellow T-shirts. I thought they were all rather pathetic and brought shame on themselves and their country. Should they all be put on the naughty step, or do you approve of this type of protest? Because if you approve of one, you surely have to approve of the other, even if you disagree with it. Or are you a hypocrite too? 0345 6060 9